Okay. So there's probably not a magical number, but would you say that if you've interviewed, um, 3 to 4 weeks is a reasonable expectation if you have not heard anything in 3 to 4 weeks, short of them knowing the position has been put on hold, that you probably haven't been selected?
I would say not to make that assumption because again, there's so many moving dynamics. If you have not heard back within 2 to 3 weeks, then you definitely want to reach out to the recruiter. Be that via email, phone call. It's kind of typical of the old saying that the loudest will or the squeakiest wheel gets the oil.
Mm-hmm.
So as a recruiter, I'm seeing hundreds of candidates come across my desk, and I'm submitting candidates. I may have 3 to 6, maybe 9 candidates in front of the hiring manager. I'm following up with the hiring manager once I don't hear back from them because from a recruiting perspective, we have a goal, which is time to fill. Our goal is to get that position filled in a timely fashion. Obviously, the faster, the better.
Okay.
I want the position to go cold or go stale, which can happen after a requisition has been open for a significant period of time.
Okay.
So I am constantly calling the hiring manager. Now, that does not mean that I'm necessarily getting responses back or that I'm getting the feedback that I'm looking for, but I am constantly trying to reach out to the hiring manager. So when I'm doing that, and again, we're going based upon you're one of the strongest candidates, so I'm telling the hiring manager, hey, let's look at, what are your thoughts on, Michelle's resume? She's a strong candidate. She meets the criteria based on X, Y, Z, and she also brings things to the table. So I'm definitely telling you to the hiring manager.
Okay.
But I'm also telling the other candidates too. So my goal is to get the position filled with the strongest candidate with the best fit. And that's what I'm striving for when I'm constantly in contact with the hiring manager. But again, if someone is calling me, that's going to just keep that person top of mind for me to really work even that much more harder.
Okay.
To get that particular person placed or at least get them an interview. I can't necessarily get someone placed in a job, but definitely I can press for the interview.
Okay, so we have a question. What does go cold mean? Does that mean that the position is welcome, Diamond? We're just talking about recruiting and how that whole process works. What does go cold mean? Does that mean that you've stopped getting responses from the company? What does that mean?
It could mean that you're going to stop getting responses from the hiring manager. It could mean that the position's on hold. It can mean that it's not that big of a priority. Maybe they saw it initially as a priority, but it's not what we call like a hot priority or a net new position. So when we talk about positions, requisitions coming in, typically, like I said, we're trying to press to get those filled within a very short period of time. The goal is to get it, filled within 3 weeks, a month at the longest, but that's really too long. Our goal is to get it filled as quickly as possible.
Right.
Because again, if on the hiring manager side, on the client side, if there's a sense of urgency from them, then it can be assumed that it's not necessarily an immediate need.
Okay.
As a recruiter, I'm treating everything as an immediate need because again, my goal is to fill that position. And typically, once recruiters work with, if you're talking about whether you're talking about internal recruiters or someone like a headhunter, there still is a goal of time to fill the position that the recruiter is held accountable for.
Okay.
Whether that's internal or, like I said, a headhunter. We have a goal or a contract that says, I'm going to have this position filled in a timely fashion.
Okay.
And that timely fashion could mean a lot of different things in a lot of different places. That could mean 30 days. If I'm talking about an executive level position, it might mean 60 to 90 days because those searches take a little bit longer. But again, that's the goal of the recruiter.
Okay. All right. And we know that the recruiter works for the company. They're not. They should be an advocate for the applicant, but we know ultimately they're trying to find this role and getting paid by the company. So I guess, can you give us some tips on what makes a good applicant And then I heard you mention this, so it's probably a two-part question. I heard you mention you should reach back out to the recruiter. Is that always the case? You know, sometimes it feels like, you know, if you're calling on, you know, some regular frequency that you're, you know, maybe being a little bit too aggressive. So can you talk about that too?
Sure. So let me take a step back. Are we what for the people that are on the chat? Are you typically looking for recruiters from an internal perspective or a headhunter perspective?
I think
or contract, because those are all different. I have to speak differently about each one. So.
Right. Well, I mean, let's take it from what you do, since you're an external recruiter, but you're contracted with that company. So I'm assuming you're kind of representing the recruiters for the companies that you're working with. So they may not have any additional recruiters working with them. So you're kind of the face of that company. So is that something that you would recommend? I know my personal feelings are, you know, maybe wrong, but if I've applied for the job and I've interviewed for the job, and you're able to call me to set everything up and make sure that, you know, I'm on time and all that, that you could at least follow back up with me. And you can speak to your time and the number of opportunities that you're working on, but it just kind of feels, frankly, just slightly disrespectful if, you know, we're going through the time of preparing and going to these interviews and, you know, sending the thank you notes out and you hear nothing. So can you speak to, you know, should we really reach out? I mean, I think you're probably a recruiter who follows up. And so that if they don't hear from you, it's certainly not because, you know, they've made a selection and you just, you know, don't want to let that person know. I know that's a difficult conversation, but when should you reach out? Should you always reach out to a recruiter?
I would say absolutely yes, because you, like I said, you want to just stay top of mind for the recruiter. So the candidate always wants to be top of mind. Now, in terms of follow-up, every recruiter, whether you're internal, contract, et cetera, every recruiter should be following up. But I can tell you that it's sometimes a sticky situation for the recruiter because, again, our goal is to fill the position with the best candidate. So we're going to speak from the perspective of I have, you know, 3 great candidates, 2 have interviewed. So we're going to talk from the perspective of 2 candidates that have been interviewed.
Right.
So I have these 2 candidates, they've been interviewed. I'm waiting to hear back from the hiring manager which one is going to move forward, or are they both, or what's going to happen next. There are situations where, again, the hiring manager, you know, just doesn't get back for a host of different reasons. It's not an excuse, but that can sometimes put the recruiter in a sticky situation because I really don't have an answer for you. And, you know, it can get old when someone's telling you, I'm waiting for the hiring manager to get back to me, and I tell you that, you know, 2 and 3 weeks in a row.
Right.
Some people will get discouraged and maybe give up. But that's why I encourage to still stay in contact, because I've had situations where I've, you know, sourced, meaning called candidates, driven the process, reaching out to candidates, hey, I have this position, get them submitted to the client, and then the client says, okay, we're going to put this on hold for a second. Or they may say nothing.
Right.
And then 3 months later, here the client comes again, like, okay, now I'm actually really, really ready
Right.
to hire this position. And so at that point, I'm going to either go back to people who have interviewed to see if they're still available, which a good recruiter will be constantly, you know, would also be reaching out. So if that were a 3-month time span, a good recruiter should have reached out at least once a month, if not more frequently, within that 3-month time span.
Right.
To keep the candidate warm. So making sure they're still available, they're still interested in the position. Yes, it's taking a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we're still interested, and I want to make sure that you as the candidate are still interested.
Right. I think that's a key point.
So contacting the recruiter, then that helps to keep that person top of mind, I posted the position and I'm getting other candidates that come in that are really great candidates as well. And so when that client calls me today and says, hey, I'm really ready to move forward, like I need to get this position filled in the next 2 weeks. Well, if John just called me an hour ago and his resume is awesome and I haven't heard from you in 3 months,
right,
I'm going to send John's resume, because again, my goal is to get the position filled.
Right.
With the available candidate or somebody that's ready to start work immediately, someone that's top of mind.
Right. I see your point. It sounds like you've got to kind of take your personal feelings out of it, especially if it's a position that you are really, really interested in it, and reach out. I know I've had several interviews here recently where, it feels like you just go into a black hole and you don't hear anything, either from the company or from the recruiter. And it can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating. So.
Yeah, I just say you have to definitely just be persistent and be diligent. And, I've been on the other side as a candidate myself. And honestly, sometimes what I would do is I have a series of follow-up emails that say different things. Are you still interested in the position still open at different levels? And so, be it every week, every 2 weeks, because I don't want to get to the place of where I'm bugging the recruiter.
Right.
But I just have these emails. I already have them typed up. I have their names, everything plugged in, ready to go, saved as a draft. And so when I was a candidate, I had a spreadsheet that had, this is the last time I contacted this client or this company, and I have everything set up. I just hit send, and, if it works out, then this is a position for me. And, if it doesn't, then maybe it's not. But I'm going to keep on until I hear some kind of feedback that says, no, I don't want to move forward. Now, it has to be within reason. If you don't hear something back in 6 months, it could possibly that, that position has been filled and the recruiter didn't get back to you, which they should always do so. But we all know that's not the case all the time.
Well, I don't know if the industry has changed, but, in talking to other people, certainly people in this group, the standard seems like it has become you won't hear from them if you didn't get it. It used to be, 10, 15 years ago that at least you would get, an automated, notification. Thank you for your interest. We'll keep your resume on file for 6 months. Should a position open up, we'll reach back out to you. But I can count on one hand the number of times I've heard back anything, which I understand. That's not a very pleasant thing to do, to share with someone that they did not get selected for the position. But I was just reading an article today, and it was talking about, how to handle, applicants that you did not select. And for those of you who are familiar with marketing, you may have heard of a net promoter score. And basically, this net promoter score is what companies use to kind of take a pulse of how people view their companies. So if you're interviewing, candidates and, not at least letting them know that they didn't get the job. So if you just think for every job, maybe a company has 10 applicants that apply. So for every job, you've got at least 9 now disgruntled people that they never hear back from. That's not going to be good for your reputation. And so when, hiring does ramp up, you may have a harder time, bringing people in, because most people don't circle back. To be honest, I know I would not, for any company that I applied for once and either didn't hear back or, didn't get accepted for the job. It's not likely that I'm going to apply ever again. And I think that's probably quite common. Dee wants us to repeat that key point. And I think what she was saying is, what is this correct strategy around reaching out once you've interviewed? Is that right, Dee? Did I capture that? Should we reach out? And what should you say? Maybe that's another thing. What should you say? Because you certainly don't want to come off as She couldn't hear the point. Okay, so all right. Well, hopefully we will cover it in our next question. But I think the gist of it is, how should you go about contacting, or when should you contact the recruiter after you've had an interview? And I think you said that you want to make sure that you're top of mind for a recruiter. So if you've had an interview and you hadn't heard back, maybe the position is put on hold. They're busy working on maybe some other recs, and you staying in contact with them would ensure that if the position opens back up, or it's just been a delay in the company getting back to you, that when they do circle back, you're the first person that they think of, as opposed to someone who did not follow up. So I think that was your point, right, Career Diva?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So, you've done a lot of recruiting. What are some, I guess, your top 3 things that you see that you are jeopardizing your chances if you do these things? Are there some, I'm sure you have some stories about what people have done, but can you give us some things that, if you do this, you're most likely not going to get a job or get that job?
Well, there's no, guarantee either way, but one thing that I would say is you definitely have to understand what I like to call the resume robot. And that's, again, the applicant tracking system. So it's very, looking for a job is almost a job in and of itself. It can become very tedious, but you have to really be willing and take out the time and effort to kind of modify you have to either have a crystal clear understanding about the positions that you're looking for and the skill sets that are required for that position, no matter what company that you're looking for that position in. And then you can kind of tailor your resume with certain keywords so that you ensure that it makes it through the applicant tracking system. Okay, that's probably one of the biggest things, is getting through that system. You can do it a number of different ways. Go and peruse and research this type of position that you're looking for. Pull out those keywords and embed them in your resume. Or there are different tricks, like, for example, copying and pasting the actual job description or words from the job description and putting it in your resume in white font.
I've heard that.
That gets you through the applicant that can help you to get through the applicant tracking system.
I've heard that.
That is a tip on the positive side.
Okay.
On the flip side of that, things that people do that will hinder them, I would definitely say being rude or impatient. Again, as a recruiter, once I've identified you as a quality candidate, it's my goal to get you into that position.
Right.
Because my goal is ultimately to have that position filled. It's not to leave the position open. That hurts me also when positions don't get filled.
Right.
So, but you just have to be a little bit patient, understanding. Now, again, that's the give and take. There has to be a relationship, again, where the recruiter is, responding to you. But if I don't call you back, in 2 or 3 days, calling me being rude or being disrespectful, it was not going to get you anywhere.
Oh, it's going to get you somewhere.
Right. Well,
just not where you want to be.
That's not where we're trying to go.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. I've got a lot of questions. Any other questions, you guys? Diamond Pieces, do you have any questions for the Career Diva? You want to make sure that this is interactive and people can ask questions that maybe you haven't had a chance to ask before. I know in my most recent interview, the hiring manager seemed to be, very enthusiastic and said, "Oh, I'm going to call you, and when are you ready to start?" And then nothing. And so especially when you're emotionally invested in the position, it can be kind of disappointing. So I guess for me, I have to weigh, do I keep reaching out to this, recruiter, with my self-esteem, if I'm calling every, month or whatever it is, and I'm, getting the same, well, I haven't heard back. I'm still waiting to hear. Your self-esteem is going to take a hit. And so I think, it's probably key to decide how long you're going to give a position and then move on after that.
Again, I mean, there's no magic number. There's no magic time frame. Just because, from the recruiting perspective, I'm pretty much the middleman.
Right.
What I can tell you, what feedback I can give you, is really determined and driven by, it could be the hiring manager, it could be hiring manager and human resources, depending on how that particular relationship or how that requisition is set up. So. Mm-hmm. I would definitely say that, in this job market, as a candidate, you definitely have to have tough skin. You have to be, it's not for the faint of heart, I can tell you that. You have to be diligent. You cannot, you can't give up. You just can't give up, which is not to say call someone every other day.
Right.
But like I said, just know that it sometimes takes it. And I've had an experience where it took me literally, oh my goodness, about 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
And I would just periodically follow up with that person. Hey, I'm still very interested based upon our last conversation. I was even more intrigued with the position. Please let me know if this position is still open or if you have another opportunity that I might be a fit for. Just things like that. But
now, did you
randomly, not say every week, maybe say every 2 weeks or something like that. But until they tell me that, hey, this position is closed,
right,
I'm gonna keep on.
Okay, that's one strategy. Now, do you find it better to email, because that way, maybe it's just a little bit less confrontational? Hey, just checking in, voice versus reaching out and calling the recruiter.
I think that it should be a combination of both, but I definitely like emails because sometimes recruiters work day and night, and as do sometimes the hiring managers. And so I may get that requisition or that email from that hiring manager saying, hey, I'm ready to move forward now. Well, I'm looking at my phone, at 12 o'clock at night. Of course, I'm not going to call you at that time of night, but I can say, I remember this great candidate, Erica. I can comb back through my emails, and if I just heard from you last week, then again, your resume, your email, your resume is right there near the top or at the top. And I'm like, okay, hey, here's this great candidate. I think I sent this to you before, but she's still available. Excellent fit, etc. And that just might be that, magical time that it happens.
Okay. All right. You talked a little bit about the market. You and I are here in Houston. And I heard at the end of last year that first quarter, things were going to start to open up first quarter. Are you seeing that? I mean, I know that you don't necessarily limit yourself to the Houston market, but are you seeing things open up in general from your clients?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
From your clients, are you seeing things open up? And can everybody still hear? If you'll let me know if you can still hear her. Okay, great. All right, go ahead.
So I think that things are opening up. I'm seeing some, the wheels starting to churn and things are starting to move. We're starting to get more requisitions. And I think that as we move into second quarter, so, mid-April, end of April, you'll start to see a lot more movement. I've seen a lot of movement in, spaces like healthcare, some in the energy, oil and gas industry, primarily energy, area I've seen some movement. And
Okay.
those are the spaces that I work in, and so that's kind of where I've seen some movement in those areas.
Okay.
Other areas that, might be applicable to your audience would definitely be, spaces in the life sciences and things like national labs, automotive engineering, and things like that, where I'm starting to see more movement.
So I don't know if you have a particular industry focus, but Houston's second most populous industry after oil and gas is healthcare. From my perspective, I thought maybe that's a easier transition from oil and gas. A lot of us worked in oil and gas or supporting industries of oil and gas. Do you do much in healthcare, and do you know anything about that industry here in Houston?
I don't do a lot in healthcare, honestly. What I have seen is, again, more on the technical side. And so when I say technical, I mean engineering technology, mechanical engineering technology, people that understand how to repair like MRI machines and things of that nature.
Okay.
So I can get more on the technical side.
Okay.
But I do see a lot of requisitions just within my organization that are focused on tons of things in the Lean Six Sigma, process improvement, quality, and things of that nature. And I think that that's where, people that may have been in oil and gas or energy might find a space that they can transition to with quality, Six Sigma, things of that nature. Okay.
All right. I think some of us have that training and background. I know I do. And I've got at least one member who's going through that training right now. You certainly don't want to spend a career of 20 years and then transition back to the bottom, especially when you're 10 years away from retirement. So it sounds like maybe that's a viable field that we can transition to without having to leave Houston. What are some other ones? I've done a previous Blab on patent law because that's a field where they're looking or actually have a requirement that you have a science or engineering background. And so your experience is beneficial in understanding the process associated with getting a patent, reviewing a patent. But are there some other fields, since you're technical, are there some other ancillary fields? I just saw something called data science. Are you familiar with data science? And if so, are you seeing any positions for that?
I'm not 100% familiar with data science, but I can definitely tell you, like I said, anything that, so your natural sciences, life sciences, positions in your geosciences. And so when I say labs, I'm talking about like national labs, so whether that, it has a chemical engineering background. And lots of times I've seen where you don't necessarily, a lot of these companies are willing to train, mm-hmm. and they're willing to give people a chance if you are able to articulate your skill sets. And so what I mean by that is, say, for example, we talked about Lean Six Sigma, quality, process improvement. Now, different companies call that different things, and so you've got to really, kind of be out there constantly researching, constantly reading trade magazines of spaces or industries and companies that you're interested in going into. So, for example, I had a client that had a program called ACE Process Improvement, and I was able to go through that training with that client, and ACE was exactly Six Sigma.
Okay.
But they had their own, they had some little, internal nuances that were slightly different, but, I mean, really 95% of it was just Six Sigma. But if you saw ACE somewhere,
you would think
on a job description, that would not correlate for you. So what I'm saying is that you got to kind of do your research and find out the different, you got to stay up on the terminology, and, one industry may call it this, another industry may call it that. And so you got to kind of stay up on top of those things.
So with the Houston market flooded with plethora of technical folks with all manner of backgrounds and Six Sigma and sales and business development. How do you compete with this concept of the purple squirrel? And the purple squirrel is this mythical applicant that meets all the criteria of the position you're trying to fill, and obviously they're currently working. So there's the appeal of snatching somebody away from another organization. Their salary requirements are probably on the low end of what. So this mythical purple squirrel, how do you compete with that? I mean, I feel like there are companies out there who are waiting with making a hiring decision because they think there's a better candidate out there. So how do you do that? I don't even apply for jobs that I don't have all the criteria for, because I just don't think I'm going to make the cut with so many other candidates. So how do you do that? How do you even cut through?
Well, there's I guess a couple of ways. First of all, the purple squirrel, it is a mythical creature, and they're definitely non-existent. And so as recruiters, we understand that. Now, sometimes getting the hiring manager to understand that's another conversation.
Right.
But as a recruiter, we get that, hey, this is as close as you're going to get. This is, 99.9% perfect candidate that you're ever going to get.
Right.
So, we're, again, pressing to move forward with the strongest candidates that we have. So in order to kind of navigate that whole conversation, you have to do things to get noticed. Like I said, being persistent, doing things like learning how to navigate the ATS systems, the applicant tracking system, writing very well-tailored cover letters. And, sometimes you apply to these tracking systems, you can submit different documents. And so if there's something, maybe it's a paper that you've written that was published, or if there's something that you've done
right.
that can, give some validity to what you're saying in your resume, upload a part of that document that,
okay.
Really highlights that skill set that you have.
Okay.
Highlight, different things like a special class, or maybe you speak another language. Or it doesn't even have to be that you speak another language. It could be that something that would tell me a lot about a candidate is if I see as like maybe a hobby or something, an area of interest is traveling or learning different languages. That can tell me that person is open to learning, they're open to growing, trying new things. And so those are sometimes, when I have candidates who may have the exact same skill set, that might be a deciding factor after talking to the candidates that both pretty much sound the same, but maybe this candidate over here, Erica's really, strong. Plus, I like the fact that she's open-minded, she's, innovative, and I can tell that from a conversation we've had, but then also from things that are on the resume.
Okay. What about charity work? I've got a question. Is that impressive? Is that something that you're seeing companies look for in their applicants?
They do somewhat look for that. But it's about looking for candidates that are aligned with their goals and their missions. And so if you have, maybe you're a person that, maybe has 5, 6 nonprofits that you enjoy volunteering with.
Okay.
It might not be wise to list them all out on your resume, but you might go and figure out, okay, this company partners with, two of the same organizations that I like to work with. And so, you can highlight that in the resume and also in the interview. You want to intertwine that into your, into the conversation when you get to the point of an interview. But another way to utilize the volunteer activities is to kind of figure out, okay, I'm going to use Shell, for example. So they have every year the Shell Open. That's an activity that people can attend. It's a ticketed event you can, purchase. Lots of times they give those tickets away. They're giving away for free, or they're, really inexpensive. Or you can volunteer to participate. And I do it every year. And so, for example, on my team, there's a host of other recruiters, HR people, and then there are some that are not in that space. And so that's an opportunity. You can go online and kind of look and see who's on a team. Do some research on LinkedIn before you get on a team, and say, hey, I want to be on that team. And so that's a way for you to network. You just have to be strategic about your volunteering activities, I think. Okay.
Do you recommend that as a way to build relationships? We've probably all heard that most jobs are filled through referral as opposed to applicant. Can you speak on that a little bit? And one other question. I know I keep giving you two questions. If someone is in the ATS, an external recruiter cannot submit you. Is that correct?
Well, as a headhunter, it's not that the headhunter cannot submit you, but it is that there's no reward for the recruiter for that.
Okay.
Because when you're talking about from a headhunter perspective, then the client is paying the headhunter to find those quote-unquote purple squirrels or to find those candidates that they can't seem to tap into for whatever reason.
Right.
And so that's what they're getting. That's what that headhunter is getting paid for. If the client discovers, hey, well, I kind of already found them myself, then no, I'm not going to pay you for that because they were already mine. You're not giving me something new. You're giving me something that kind of already belonged to me. So.
Right. I guess in response to that, I would say, so, that would make me think to never apply through their system. I would rather have maybe a shortcut from an external recruiter presenting me than applying. So, that kind of, I understand the company's perspective that they don't want to pay for somebody that was already in their system, but they didn't find them. So, I mean, can you speak on that? How do you determine whether you should apply, to a position and become part of their talent pool versus a recruiter? It seems like a good recruiter, has the ability to get you in quicker and maybe more successfully.
Absolutely. I'm going to be a little bit partial because, of course, I am a recruiter, but I would definitely say that I wouldn't suggest that you never apply directly to a client, but definitely, partnering with a recruiter has a lot of advantages because if you're working with a good recruiter, they're going to have that rapport, that relationship, and they're going to be able to get you in front of that client much faster because typically, if as a headhunter, I have a client and I'm out looking for to fill a particular position, I'm not dropping that candidate into the applicant tracking system. I'm emailing that hiring manager directly. I'm emailing the HR person directly. And we already have a rapport. We already have a relationship. So I can say, hey, Erica's a great candidate.
Right.
XYZ, let's get her to an interview. And then back, and of course, you go back and then complete the online application. But I think it's beneficial to work with the recruiter. And I can say that just about every job I've ever had was either a referral or working with a recruiter. Or even it was a referral from another recruiter.
Okay. Because you all share, especially if you work for the same company, you share candidates. So a candidate that may not be a fit for your particular posting may be, for your colleague, a great fit.
Absolutely. And we also share outside of the internal organization. So I know, tons of recruiters, and if I know someone if I know I have a friend that's a recruiter that does, say, IT recruiting, that's not my wheelhouse. That's not my space. And I've met a great candidate. Hey, here's this person. You should call them. Because again, the recruiter's looking to win. They're looking to fill the position. And so anything I can do to help a colleague, whether that's internal or external, I'm going to do that. And, for me personally, as with many recruiters, they have a passion for helping people, and that also means helping the candidate. And when they meet a great candidate or get a referral, they're going to do everything they can to get that person placed. It doesn't always work out that way, but that is the goal.
Okay. All right. We're looking at about 8 minutes till 8, so I want to make sure I leave time for anybody who has any other questions. Do you all have any other questions? I think for me, just having the Career Diva as a resource to ask these questions, because, as she mentioned, the job search is a job itself, and it could be soul sucking. I saw that somewhere that, you could, really take a hit to your self-esteem, especially as your job search drags on from days, weeks to months. And you just want to make sure that you're doing all that you can do, to present yourself in the best possible light to be considered. I think probably getting to the first interview is half the battle. And so every day you're a little closer to your next position. And I want to make sure that I share with the ladies all the tips and tricks and things that that can get us a little closer to our next opportunity. So does anybody have any final questions for the Career Diva? And Career Diva, what little secret tips and tricks do you have or you've used yourself in a career search? Anything from joining organizations, or are there any organizations you recommend joining that will be beneficial, or other career tips that you have? You're the Career Diva, so we know you know lots of stuff.
Well, I'm going to say the biggest tip, because I heard you say something. You said if you don't think you're a fit, you don't apply for the position. And I would suggest that if you have maybe 50% of the skill set, I would suggest that you go ahead and apply for it anyway. I went to a women's conference and I heard a lady say that, there's statistics out that say that men get hired faster than women, of course, for a number of different reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is that they get hired faster and they get more money than we do. It's simply because they ask for it, because they go for it. They apply for jobs that they really are not qualified for, or not 100% qualified for, whereas women don't.
Right.
And I say be bold and BS.
Okay.
Get out there, sell yourself. Sometimes you have to add a little fluff to it, but get out there and go after it.
I bet you're probably right. As I reflect on my own experience, I get the impression now, after some extended time, that my natural introverted side probably is not working in my advantage, and maybe the candidates who are more what's the right word? Outgoing or demonstrative, maybe getting these jobs that I'm applying for. So I think that's good advice. I think, like I said, I work to balance the applying for these jobs with the trying to keep my morale and self-esteem up. It could be difficult when you're getting rejections on a regular or frequent basis just to keep going. So I want to encourage everybody to, make sure that you put yourself first if you're in the job market right now. If you think you are about to, because your company is going to be laying off, make sure you surround yourself with the right people. Take care of yourself during this time, because it's very easy to get discouraged when you're not getting called back for the positions, when it feels like I'm the only person going through it. I think Nakiki probably can speak to it. There are a lot of people who are in the job market right now, and you're usually one of many people applying for jobs, and it can feel like you're the only person not getting called back. But I think that's just the way of the world right now, and a good recruiter certainly would keep you warm, as Naikiki mentioned. But those are probably few and far between. Naikiki, I would think you're probably the exception and not the rule. So maybe in closing, I'll ask one final question: is how can we tell who's a good recruiter and who's, maybe closer to a used car salesman? Are there some things that we should look out for? I heard somebody say on one of the blabs that if you work with some less than scrupulous recruiters, they may be applying or using or submitting you for jobs that they didn't even tell you about. So they've got your resume and they think they can get that rec. So they're submitting you for a position that they didn't even get your permission for. Are there some things that we should be on the lookout for when working with recruiters that would say, hey, this person probably doesn't have, good intentions for me? Any things that you've seen in your experience with other recruiters?
Wow. Let's see. Most of my experience with other recruiters has been good. I have not, met any unscrupulous recruiters, to be honest about it. I think that recruiters are moving a mile a minute. And I don't know that if they are intentionally, say, submitting your resume to a position just randomly. It could be that you apply with me for a position, you didn't get that position, or it didn't pan out with the position closed, whatever might have happened. Another position comes open, and again, because we're thinking about time to fill, and sometimes clients will say, from a headhunting perspective, okay, Career Diva, I'm going to give you 5 hours to submit candidates. And after that, I'm opening it up to my 10 other recruiters that I work with.
Oh, okay.
And so in my mind, of course, I have a goal, which is to get that filled. I'm going to submit, Diamond, Erica, and John. And then I'm going to circle back to you on the back end and call you and say, hey, just FYI, I submitted you to this position. I think you'd be great for it. Are you open to it? But it's better for me to submit you and then you get selected than not submit you. And we both lose the opportunity to submit you to the position. So I think that what sometimes happens, and it could be that maybe the recruiter forgets to call you, or sometimes clients will hold a resume because once I give it to the client, it's theirs.
Okay.
Now, they're supposed to circle back to me. If they place you, say, within a year, they should circle back to the recruiter and say, hey, I placed one of your candidates. And again, a good recruiter is going to know that because I'm constantly in touch with my strong candidates,
right?
Keeping them warm. Hey, did you find something yet? What's going on in your world type of conversation. So I would know that. But lots of times, it's the client who does that. They post the resumes from the recruiters. They can say, oh, hey, we're closing this requisition. And then 2 months later, I'm on to something else. They now have your resume in hand and just give you a call and say, hey, I had your resume. I want to, interview for this position. And you're thinking, okay, I never applied directly to your company.
Right.
So 3, 4, 6 months down the road, you're not thinking about, oh, I gave that resume to the Career Diva for this one position. Now they're calling me about something else.
Right.
And, sometimes the recruiters aren't even allowed to tell you what company it is. So you may not even know who's getting your resume in the first place.
Right.
So I would just say, the things to look out for in terms of who's a good recruiter is someone that I think that communication is just really the biggest key. Are they communicating with you? Are they being honest? Are they responding at a reasonable time? And a reasonable time may not be in 2 to 3 days. I mean, the top tier recruiters should be getting back to you within at least 48 hours with some type of feedback. Again, it may not be what you want to hear, but they're telling you something. And so if you're not getting that, if you're not getting open and honest communication from a recruiter, that would be a sign of concern. If you're not, even if you're not getting, I would say, some coaching from your recruiter. So, for example, if you talk to a recruiter and say there's a misspelling on your resume, or, you know, maybe that you said something that, you know, was a little off. But that recruiter is not catching that and saying, hey, well, maybe you should try X, Y, Z in the interview. Or they're not taking time to coach you before interview, just kind of throwing you out there. Hey, I sent your resume over here.
Right.
Good luck. The good recruiter is going to take time out and say, hey, this is the company culture. This is how they want you to answer the questions. That type of thing. You know, it may not be this long 30-minute conversation. It might be a 5-minute conversation, but there should be some coaching and advising, you know, for you in that communication from the recruiter. If you're not getting that, that's kind of things that I would be concerned about.
Okay. I can say that I've had that experience with a recruiter where they even provided me with interview video on how to prepare. And then I've had some recruiters say, hey, I want to submit you. And, you know, besides, you know, what the position is and what possibly the salary range is, that's the only insight I've gotten. So that's a good tip. So
and I think that, and I don't know if you agree, but I think that when you have the recruiter who takes that time out and coaches and kind of informs you, you still feel good about the relationship. You don't feel like I've gotten out. Even if you don't get the job, you walk away from it. I got something out of this. I was able to get some tips on what I can do better,
right,
or something. So that's when you're going to know that you're working with a quality recruiter.
Right, right. Because, you know, you may want to keep that relationship, you know, for the next time that you're in the market for another position. So you definitely want to weed out the good from the bad, because you don't want to waste your time, and you don't want your resume, you know, all over town, and companies getting it from various sources. So thank you for that tip. We're a little bit over, but I mean, I still have plenty of questions. So, you know, hopefully we can do this again, Career Diva. I've got questions about, you know, how to explain gaps in your resume. I mean, there's just so many things that I think, you know, we don't know, that I'm sure we could have a show on a regular basis addressing those things. So I'll do one more call to see if anybody has any more questions, and then we'll wrap it up for this week, and you know, get ready for the rest of the week and next week's Blab. So before we go, do we have any more questions for the Career Diva? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you, Career Diva, for joining us. It was awesome. I think the reason that, you know, we do this is so that we could share information with the community. As Black women, sometimes I don't think we get all the pertinent information that we need in managing our career. And sometimes that's why we don't get the opportunities that other demographics do. So I want to thank you for participating. We'll have the video down next time so we can see the Career Diva as well as hear her. So I'm going to thank you again for participating. Thank you all for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And if you guys have any ideas for Blabs, if you like this forum, let me know. And if you have any ideas that you would like to see on our weekly Blab, certainly shoot me an email at bwiseusa@gmail.com. And I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.